Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I have back again, it's been a while, but I have back again Victoria Pelletier as my guest, and she is very impressive, but we're going to go through her background just as a reminder for those that have not seen that past podcast. So Victoria is a 20-plus year corporate executive and board director. She is nicknamed the turnaround queen by former colleagues and employers. Victoria inspires and empowers her teammates in leading psychological turnarounds, which are as much about changing mindsets as it is about restoring and growing revenue and profitability. She engenders respect through transparency and open communication, putting in place structures that encourage collaboration and decision-making in shaping a better future. She was recognized as a top 50 business leader in technology by Insight Magazine in 2021 and a member of the year, a mentor of the year by Women in Communication and Technology in 2020. She's got some other awards, but we're going to go ahead and get right into this, talking about leading with resilience and innovation. Those of you that listen to my podcast know that I just really love this topic. I think that it's never talked about enough, and even as a reminder for us. But you know that first two things we always ask as the easy questions before we get into the gold is first to ask Victoria, where do you currently live? Where do you call home?
I call Miami Beach home.
Yes, she's still a Miami girl. I'm going to be down in Miami speaking in October.
Awesome. We'll need to meet.
Catch up. Yeah, we'll have to catch up. So I gave all these accolades, but it's always, the journey is always a little bit more than what the paper has written down. So talk about the different paths and pivots that you had to make to get you to where you are today.
Well, thank you for having me back. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today, Vicki. So my journey as a leader began very, very early. I started working at age 11. I'm sure that would not be allowed with today's child labor laws.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
That's true. And my first leadership role was at 14. I was the assistant manager of a shoe store while I was in high school. And that for me was certainly the beginning, but of something I would continue to feel for years and years. I was the youngest by pretty significant. And actually many of the leaders that, or the people I was leading in that business were like 15, 20 years older than me. And so I remember imposter syndrome back then. Of course, we didn't call it that. But that sort of stayed with me for a period of time, even as I gained more confidence in my leadership skills, usually because I was so young. My first executive role came at age 24. I got recruited out of banking. Now, interestingly, one of the pivots I made is I wanted to be a lawyer from the moment I think I was like 10 or 11 years old. But while I was in university, I worked at a bank in their contact center, flexible hours to accommodate my school schedule. And I got promoted very quickly through there. And so as I thought about going from my undergrad to law school, I got relocated across the country with a promotion and realized how much I love the corporate world. And so I kept putting off law school. So never did I move back out west, which is where, I had grown up and gone to school, nor did I ever go to law school. Although I feel like I read way more contracts than I might have if I were sitting in in a legal profession. And I got recruited out of the banking environment at age 24, and I was a brand new mother to my first executive role. I stepped in as chief operating officer for a private outsourcing organization that had many banking clients, which was part of why they brought me in. And that changed my life significantly. I took a bold risk, again, being so young, being a new mother, and stepping into this insane role. And my leadership showed up in a very particular way over those first few years in some kind of a way to prove my seat at the table, and that didn't include showing vulnerability or emotion. So that is something I've leaned into very heavily since, to become what I refer to as a whole human leader that embraces some of the things you talked about, vulnerability and authenticity, transparency, and the way I communicate being some of those.
So you were in the bio, you heard me say that you've been called the turnaround queen. So could you just share an example of a particular challenging psychological or business turnaround, and what leadership principles guided you through that?
I'm actually proud of that nickname. There's some I've been given in the past that I've had to work very hard to overcome. The Iron Maiden was the one I don't like, and I worked really hard to now be known as more of the turtle, resilient but soft inside. But turnaround queen, I'm proud of, and that one is a result of many things. And I will give you a specific example, but a large part of it comes from the fact that I do not like the status quo. I really like to be challenged. I am kind of the type of person who will break stuff just to put it back together again. And so as a result, I'm often given those businesses or business units or divisions that are underperforming to help them turn around. And I've also been a part of and supported clients with lots of merger and acquisition and related transactions, almost 40 of them now. One in particular was I worked for one company where we went through so much transformation in a short period of time. We ended a joint venture with another business. We then rebranded, went public, and acquired 6 companies in 18 months. So there was just like so much change and turmoil all around. And one I remember, and it was caused me to have to reflect very much and do something that's not natural for me. I'm not naturally a patient person. I'm way better professionally than I am personally. If you ask my family, they'll agree to that. One of I think it was the second or third of those 6 acquisitions, we acquired a company, and I was leading our North American operations and client-facing teams, which was probably 80% of the workforce. So I consistently was having to look at how do we integrate them in, how do I need to change the structure? I very easily could have, in this case, taken some of the leadership roles out for integration. But in this instance, some of these leaders were extremely client-facing. So I made a point of, meeting with each of our top clients as well to understand the dynamics. And there was a woman who fought me so hard. Her name was Kathy. I remember it now, for a multitude of reasons. I had been recently relocated to the US from Canada. I had only had a couple of years in this particular industry. She's like, what does this 28 or 30-year-old know about our business? This Canadian chick coming down to New York. She was this tough New Yorker. And, when she'd been in the business for at least 30 years, I think, at that point. And so this was one for me where I understood the deep connection with our client and the risk to the client and to her team, and therefore delivery, by not getting it right with her. And so for me, the psychological piece was I needed to find a way to demonstrate to her how we could partner. I came with very different skills to the table that I thought she could learn from and would help through this transition. And she came with 30 years of experience that I did not have in that.
Yeah.
And I needed to show her that I trusted her and the team. And so it took me a year to get her on board. And I think, developing trust by getting to know her. And a pivotal moment was one of our team members had made a big mistake that cost us some money with a client. And our North American CEO came to the table. We had a leadership meeting and wanted to know who was it, what like that. And I said, look, Tom, it doesn't matter. I am ultimately accountable for this. And what I can assure you, I said, is that we have spoken to the individual, we have rectified it, and we will not see this, happen again.
Yeah.
That was a defining moment with her. I had her back. I didn't throw her team member under the bus.
Yeah.
And then when we went through our next acquisition, she all of a sudden had a very solid seat at the front of the bus to help me get others on board.
Nice.
But again, that took a very long time, longer than generally I would like to see happen. I usually actually don't wait that long. But again, the criticality to client and team caused me to just be that patient and continue to work and work.
And, that's so true. And that's why I teach leading with the heart, the head, and the hands is you have to build those relationships. It does not, you can't be that person that comes in and tries to change everything and be the know-it-all and all those kind of things. You got to kind of understand what the waters have in there. And so good advice. In today's evolving corporate landscape, how do you approach fostering innovation and growth while maintaining focus on diversity and inclusion? And I think this is really important because like the world is spinning faster than ever before. And people are more aware of all of those things, of the need to be innovative and not knowing sometimes what to do, the need to grow and not knowing how to do it. And then diversity and inclusion are right in our forefront now. Maybe not as much as it needs to be, but far more than whenever I started working 40 years ago.
Yeah, I used to deliver a keynote talk around the future of work, and I changed the title of it because the reality is the future is now. And it's a big part of the reason why I wrote my latest, book called The Power of Whole Human Leadership. And it's all of the things that you were talking about wrapped up into what I believe being like this whole human leader is. And that includes the evolution now as we look at innovation and the pace of change. So for me, and now I've spent since I stepped into that first executive role, which is a B2B professional services industry and environment, that's where I've spent the rest of my career ever since. Much more heavily so in technology over the last number of years with companies like IBM or Accenture.
Yeah.
And so we're at the forefront of also working with other companies on, what does innovation look like and how do you utilize technology, within the organizations. As a result of all of the change, and particularly technology, at the forefront, digital transformation, and now we all hear about AI.
Yeah.
The reality is it's changing every workforce. Every company is a technology company, even if they sell different products or services.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the shelf life of skills has reduced dramatically to around the 2-year mark. So we need to change mindsets of our employees to get comfortable with change
Yeah.
and embracing the change in the work. The reality is that AI and machine learning and automation should hopefully take out the routine from people's work, and what gets left behind, I'll call it, is the things that should hopefully really excite people. The ability to deal with the exceptions and the customers directly, solving problems and innovating. So it's been about changing mindset, and to one of your questions too around like they don't know what skills they need, what growth is going to look like. So I think this is where the role of HR is more important than ever, because they need to be your strategic business partner side by side with the business to identify, here's our strategy over the next couple of years. What is changing? Where are we growing? What skills do we have today? And what do we need in 1, 3, or 5 years from now? And the propensity of those within the business to learn, and how do we build that? And as leaders, identifying, that the talent and where they want or could go. Again, their propensity to learn and their potential, and helping bridge those things.
Yeah, I think if any of the soft skills that people bring, the ability to be flexible and change is just so important now. And I was talking on another podcast a few days ago about how this is such an exciting time to me, because I came out into the business world when computers were just introduced. And so for me, all of those skills that I learned in business school and, what some people were learning in college became sort of not relevant anymore, because, the skills that I thought I was going to need to be impactful as assistant, or at that time a secretary. I sucked at typing, and I was excellent at shorthand, but I knew shorthand was not going to be used much. And, I had to work for lawyers to even use it. And so I embraced the scariness of not knowing anything about technology, but figuring I will be a sponge. And that's what I tell you, young people now, is everything that comes along, be a sponge. And, it's exciting to me to see the 5-year-olds to, 15, 20-year-olds that have no fear of picking up a new technology and doing stuff with it and understanding it. Whereas, for a person who was just learning how to use a computer after typing. I had a 40-year-old that used to argue with us in the accounting firm that she could do the 50-page annual report faster than that computer could do it. And it's just because she didn't want to learn. But once she did learn, then she changed her tune. And I think that's what we're seeing now with AI, is that everybody should be looking at, not being afraid of it, but what new skill can I get out of this new technology to make
Yeah,
me have more time for personal freedom? Because I'm not spending 5 hours working on a PowerPoint.
that's right.
Yeah. All right. So you have achieved significant milestones early in your career, as you were mentioning. But what advice would you give that emerging leader that's trying to break barriers and accelerate their own career growth? And also touch on the fact that they're not on an island, that they mentors, and the value of having somebody that they can talk to and get as a advice from and such.
Yeah. There's not, and I think you were sort of getting to that with a question. There's not one single thing. There's many. So for me, the one piece of advice I would go back and give my 20-something-year-old self is around vulnerability and authenticity. I was afraid to share my lived experience out of fear of being rejected by others, or even embarrassment, quite frankly, by some of that. I was afraid to be vulnerable because I was the only woman. I was the youngest person at the table. I was afraid it would show a sign of weakness. So I would tell my 20-something-year-old self that those are incredibly powerful traits and gifts, and actually opens the world and creates greater opportunities.
Yeah.
So I wish I had learned that a lot sooner. But then I would also say beyond that. So for me, big part of my authenticity is I have always been driven. I am generally not known for, Canadians are not known for this as much, but I am way more direct. So when I first moved to New York, everyone, other than the few words that I say that sound Canadian, everyone thought I was a native New Yorker, because I am very driven. I'm very direct, so radical candor, although I do it from a place of care and compassion. Those are things that have also gotten me named different kinds of traits. And so, but I still think it's really important to be your authentic self. I do think it's important to be vulnerable and transparent in the way in which we communicate, because that builds connection and trust with people. And to your point, Vicki, I do think it's really important well, actually, a couple things. One, we just talked about skills. Do not leave that in the hands of others. Make sure you yourself are continuing to work to develop skills to perform and understand how that performance connects to success. And help with that comes through what you were talking about. I think there's 3 different types of people you would want there. There's what I refer to as the coach, which is that person that helps you in the role that you're in with those skills, with performance. Usually it's your direct line leader. The next are the mentors. And so finding people that can help you on that journey. And most people, I tend to think just linearly and like finding people in higher up in the hierarchy, whereas I think that helps. But you also need to find people who've, come, and you talked about diversity earlier, very different, like diverse skills and experience to leverage, whether
Mhm.
different countries they worked in, maybe it's different functional areas, but there's still
Yeah.
things that can overlap, to people that have come from competitors, to just people with different experience. So find those. And then the last is sponsors. Now, those are harder to find because in my case, I choose the person that I'm going to sponsor because I know their performance, because I know their
Right.
potential, because I understand their values and integrity. But I do think you need all three of those to help you career-wise.
Well, and it never hurts to ask and,
Oh, yeah.
and get some guidance as to, what would it take kind of thing. But I think one of the beautiful things about whenever I worked at UPS as a project manager is I never really left from the corporate office, but I had about 15 different careers because of the exposure that I had with each project that I ran. And
Hmm.
every time you learned about a different group, a different process, a different department, and you're allowed to, or I guess you're exposed to different cultures, it makes you better at everything that you do. And so you just have to be, again, um, active listening to what's going on to understand what you need to absorb. And maybe some things you do need to recognize, well, let's not do that. Let's just
That's right.
pass by that way. You've spoken about the power of personal branding in professional development. And how has your personal brand evolved over these years from that young executive to who you are today?
The power of a strong personal brand is another one of the elements I will say that's contributed to some of my career success.
Hmm.
I didn't have the vernacular many years ago. That evolved later. But what I recognize, even when I stepped into that first B2B role, I was trying to find a way to differentiate the business and the people that were in the business, because people do business with people they like and they trust.
That's
Therefore,
right.
they want to do business with. And so I started building my brand then. And what I will state, and this was, by the way, I got really busy while I was in career transition in the last, year and a bit. That transition soon to end. I wrote one book on personal branding that came out in January, and then the latest one that was just released on leadership. And it's because people, I think, view only one element of personal brand, and that's your kind of eminence, which is your subject matter expertise, and
Yeah.
usually who you do it for. That's only one part of it. The other, so I believe there's four parts to a strong personal brand. There is that piece, the what you do, and maybe what industry or who you do it for. But I
Yeah.
will also say never tie your brand exclusively to a company. But then the next part is storytelling. What makes
Yes.
you you? The lived
Hmm.
experiences that you have, your passions, your interests, your values. And the next one is what makes you different. And sometimes those overlap, very much so. But when you look at a crowded field, so again, spending lots of years in like management consulting, there's lots of consultants who come with years and years of experience in a particular function and particular field. But who to choose from? What makes you
Yeah.
different? I mentioned my radical candor. In management consulting, that's a differentiator because many times consultants tell clients what they want to hear, not
Want
what
to
they need to hear.
hear. Yeah.
And then the last part of that is, what do you want to be known for? So I've been really successful in business, but when I die, that's not actually, I want that to be a footnote of what they talk about. I want it to be who I was as a human. What did I do to make workforces, community, and the world at large a better place? My focus on social justice, on DEI, the fact that I've raised really good human beings, those things. So those are the elements. And to the other point of your question, mine's had to evolve and change. So my one definition of success and what I wanted to be known for in my 20s and even into my early 30s was very different. I made a
Yeah.
big pivot, and much more of that came with the definition of legacy and impact and what I wanted to be known for, and who I was as a leader and how that evolved as well. And so I tell your listeners, spend time crafting that brand identity in those sort of four buckets, but recognize that it's okay to pivot. And it's
Hmm.
like, because you're going to change and evolve over time. And maybe you make
Yeah.
a wholesale career change. And that's okay. What remains the same is storytelling and differentiation, though. And so that will be there. And again, you'll tweak as you have like, more stories to tell. But I do think it's really, really important to focus on brand.
Yeah. And I'm a perfect example of that. I mean, I could have, when I retired and found that I wasn't ready to not be doing things, I could have gone to be a project manager again and been very successful at that. But this was different. This was, one of those things that it's like, why not? And I think as you go through life, rather than thinking of all of the what ifs this or what if that, but I rather say, well, why not? Let's give it a go. And, if it doesn't put me in jail or kill me, then it's a good thing to do, right? So, um, not everybody understands that, obviously, as you do these things. Let's talk about resilience. So for a little
Mm.
bit, it really has been a theme throughout your whole career, as well as your personal life. You had some tragedies and things that shaped, obviously, who you are today. What strategies, though, do you use to maintain this resilience in the face of adversity, whether it be in your business life or your personal life? And how do you inspire those that you meet to have that same resilience as they join you on your teams and groups? Lots of words,
I,
questions in there.
yeah, that's right, Vicki. You're right. Resilience is like should be my middle name. Although actually
Yes.
I refer to as being unstoppable. So I actually do sign a lot of my social media posts. In fact, my LLC is Unstoppable You, and that's just because that is my like philosophy. And
Yeah.
for me that means there is no goal or objective or vision that I set for myself that I am not going to achieve. Will they be adversity or challenge? Yes. And then so again, that's a mindset. And so one that it's very much a part of who I am after overcoming pretty significant trauma and adversity in my youth and then and ongoing. But what I will say is I had to learn how to develop what I refer to as healthy resilience. And I'll encourage your listeners, you can go, TEDx actually asked me to deliver a talk on this very topic. Their theme was around resilience. And so I spoke about healthy resilience. And for me, the Iron Maiden nickname that I'm not proud of came one because I wore that mask at work all the time. I'm not going to be, show vulnerability or emotion, but it also came because I don't think I'd worked through all of that trauma and adversity. I was
Yeah.
very good at putting walls up around myself, but those needed to come down. And to do that, I recognized that there's steps I needed to take. And so, for me, there's 5 steps in kind of my own healthy resilience journey.
Mm.
Yes, I think that innately there's some resilience that's built into our DNA, but I think it's also like a muscle where you can learn, you can teach it, you can flex it.
Mhm.
And with that, so for me it's be really clear on what that goal or objective is for yourself. That's the anchor consistently. The next is being very self-aware and self-reflective. So for me, I needed to understand where the emotion came
Yeah.
from. I needed to work through and process that versus just shoving it to the side and understanding when these emotions came. So that incredible like self-reflection. The next is what I refer to as strategic intentionality. I use that phrase for many things, but I'll use it here as well. So being really strategic and then also with intention and action
Yeah.
towards your goal. So that's everything from your thoughts, your language, your actions, and behavior.
Mm.
And then the fourth in that is building a community around yourself who will support you on that journey and who will call you on your stuff when you need it. They're going to
Yeah.
hold you accountable. And sometimes that's also professional help. But the last step in that is, and this one's always been tough for me because I was like such a perfectionist, giving myself permission to fail. And when I
Yes. Amen.
do, get back up, and then you've got your anchor. Eye on the prize, so to speak, in terms of what is that goal or objective. And so then just continuing to work through that. So when I'm hiring people, I look for people who can be resilient. I don't need perfection. How we overcome challenge and obstacles and deal and solve, for those things is a big part of what I also want to hire for.
Whenever I coach some of the high school students on public speaking, one of the sessions I do is on interviewing. And I ask them that question about talk to me about a failure that you've had.
Mm.
And it's always interesting to see how they react to that. And depending on how they react, I give them some insight as to why I asked that question. And it's just exactly what you're saying is, I need you to be comfortable admitting that you aren't perfect, that you are going to fail. But I want to hear, how did you come back from that? You know, for me, failure is our best lessons
It
that
is.
come from
It is.
that. So you spoke a lot about self-regulation and different things, and empathy is really essential component of leadership today. That's why I coach and teach on leading with your heart, your head, and your hands. And I think it's how we have to deal with 5 different generations. It's more work. Okay, guys out there, guys and girls out there that are leaders, it is more work to get to know all your people, but that empathy piece is just so important. So how do you balance empathetic leadership with the need to be a high performing team and hold people accountable?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I don't believe it's an either or, it's an and. And so I think for many people, I think that being an empathetic leader or focusing on things like DEI or broader initiatives is like a little bit of the tick in the box that it's, doing the right thing, but they don't connect it directly to business results. For me, it is an and.
Yes.
I think that being that kind of leader drives strong business performance because even simply like people are more engaged when you're that kind of leader. And so they stay with the company longer, they perform more. So you've got better top and bottom line results, period. But to your point, it's hard. There's a time investment involved. Not everyone. I'm an open book. Your listeners can Google. They'll learn a whole lot about me. It's all out there. I share it pretty openly. And I don't suggest that everyone does that. But there's some that are so closed that as a leader, you need to learn. You need to ask those kinds of questions to them. Active listening, and then helping them on that the journey. And sometimes that comes with some of the tough love as well. And I think you can be empathetic and have difficult conversations. Again, you've done it, you've built some trust because of that kind of relationship, and that enables you to have more of those kinds of conversations. But again, if you're doing it well, you're then also focused on their success as much as the business success. And at some point, they might not be in the right seat, and you have to make some of those difficult decisions. So again, I don't think you can't be a strong performance manager, leader, and incredibly empathetic. And sometimes you do hard stuff to achieve those.
So time has flown by. Just one last question. What's the best tip you ever received as you progress through your leadership?
It was a reinforcement of something. I have a leader, Richard, whom I worked for twice in 2 different companies. And I was on the journey from pivoting from the Iron Maiden to the turtle that I said I've known. But I wasn't showing enough vulnerability. And it was funny. He's this British guy who like sometimes made people cry. Like he wasn't always like the most empathetic, but he's incredibly self-aware. And actually, I saw him get much more empathetic after years of working with him. And he said to me once, he's like, Victoria, it is okay to be vulnerable. Like he literally had said those words to me. And I'm like, but I am, and I'm doing, and I'm like, you're not seeing everything I'm doing. But still, there was some perception that was coming across. So it just reinforced to me I needed to do better, and I still needed to lean a little bit more into that.
Well, it has been a absolute pleasure, as always, to chat with you. We cannot wait another year to do this again. So for sure, we'll have to have you back again. But for those that have been intrigued, interested, excited to get to know you better, we're going to share your contact information. So again, for those that are wanting to know more about Victoria, her website is victoria-pelletier.com. That's Pelletier. Facebook, you can go to her name again, Victoria initial cap dot Pelletier initial cap dot speaker. Instagram is Victoria_Pelletier_unstoppable, as she mentioned earlier. LinkedIn is Victoria initial cap again, Pelletier initial cap speaker. And Twitter is Pelletier V29. And YouTube is Victoria Pelletier, no excuses. I'm going to turn it over to Victoria to talk to you about the things that you'll find if you go to her website and any social media that she might spend the most time in.
Thank you. I'm my website, it can connect you to all of those different platforms. I offer services as a keynote speaker. I speak on a wide variety of topics. And then I also do a limited amount of coaching, both on personal branding and some career and executive coaching. And then the 3 books that I've written, you can also find there. But they're also anywhere you choose to get books. I'm mostly an audio girl myself, so I tend to land to Spotify or Audible for those. So anywhere you're downloading or buying books, you can find them as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving us some more information. So, Victoria, thank you so much. From one Victoria to another, it's always a pleasure having you on, and definitely have to check you out whenever have a drink or something whenever I come down to Miami, but for sure getting you back on. And for those that are familiar with the show, sorry, my puppy, which I'll show in just a minute, is pulling my tail, pulling me away. As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off. I'm going to show you the puppy before we end this. I don't know if my daughter will cut it out.
Oh, cute pup.
So this is Indy, my St. Croix girl.
Awesome.
All right. That's a wrap.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.